More civilians killed in Kyiv as Russian bombing intensifies, but still Ukraine stands defiant. Ruined Mariupol refuses to surrender. Well, now, let's move on to the latest news of the war in Ukraine. And there is no sign of any let-up in the relentless bombardment by Russian forces of key towns and cities. The targets continue to include places used by ordinary men and women, civilians, in other words, rather than combatants. Now, this is the current situation on the ground in Ukraine. The shaded areas are those under Russian control. And its forces continue to advance across the country. Taking a closer look now at Kyiv itself, the dotted lines here represent Russian forces progressing from both east and west. British military analysts believe that the aim is to encircle the Ukrainian capital. Well, in one of the latest attacks, a shopping centre in a Kyiv suburb was shelled with 8 people said to have been killed there. Our global security editor, Rohit Katru, reports.
A missile strikes. The camera dislodged as a fireball sends sheets of glass flying. What starts as a rescue becomes a recovery. The cause was Vladimir Putin's war. And here was the consequence. Destruction where pizza takeaways and florists and a bowling alley once stood. Among all the grey, the bright red letters of the sports club. Smoking ruins, shattered glass, and many lives lost. Clutching his cross, the chaplain arrived with a prayer and a warning.
Russia is a terrorist and it will not stop with Ukraine if they're set on it. Tomorrow it could be a different nation that they bomb while they find excuses for their crimes.
The silence doesn't last for long. Look to the left of the screen. Another explosion, but this one's controlled. Then a rumble as 2 surface-to-air missiles are sent into the sky. This evening, Russia's Ministry of Defense released footage of its strike. It said the shopping centre was a legitimate target because it claims it was being used to store ammunition. It says the attack destroyed multiple Ukrainian rocket launch systems. It is also close to residential buildings, though. Increasingly around Kyiv, the Russian military is relying on long-range missiles as nearby its troops are repelled on the ground. The sound of gunfire in the centre of Kyiv this evening. A new curfew, 35 hours long, is just beginning as Russia's strategy evolves. Rohit Katru, ITV News, Kyiv.
Well, the southern city of Mariupol has been virtually obliterated by the Russian onslaught. And yet it continues to defy its attackers, refusing to comply with a Russian deadline to surrender early this morning. News from the city is very hard to come by, but we spoke to one family who did manage to get out, bloodied and battered, but alive. Our correspondent Garrett Vincent heard their story.
Not even 1 month ago, the Vodonyanskas were a very happy family. They lived near the sea in Mariupol. Today, Svetlana bears the scars of war. Their car crashed as they fled the city last week, a journey which began with a desperate escape from their own neighbourhood. As soon as we left home, she told me, the rockets started to explode around us, hitting the buildings, and power lines fell down across the road in front of us. I shouted at my kids, she said, don't look out of the windows. I didn't want them to see the corpses in the street. A month ago, Svetlana's husband, Roman, had a job as a plumber. She had a business baking cakes. Now they're experts on Russian weapons. Svetlana mimics the sound of the Grad missiles which began the assault. Then there are the cluster bombs, which come down on little parachutes and explode in the air. And the vacuum bombs, which sent clouds of fire through their streets. The smiles have fallen from the children's faces. 1 month ago, Svetlana and Roman's eldest, Diana, was studying for her high school diploma. Now my school isn't there anymore, she says. Atrocity is not a strong enough word for what's happened to my city. The attack on that city goes on. The Ukrainian government rejected an ultimatum from the Russians, issued to try to force the surrender of Mariupol. The Russians, says Roman, have never accepted our sovereignty. They have always, he says, regarded us as their colony. And from his traumatized family, there is defiance. I believe in our soldiers, says Svetlana. They will save our city, and we will return. We will repair, she said, what has been broken. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Western Ukraine.
Well, Russian troops have reportedly opened fire on protesters in the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson. Footage posted online appeared to show people running for cover. Ukraine armed forces said stun grenades were used on the crowd protesting against Russian occupation. And Ukrainian officials have accused Russia of shelling residential areas in the port city of Odessa. Fire crews have been taking fires that broke out after the strikes early today. There are no immediate reports of casualties. OK, well, let's return to our global security editor, Rohit Katru, who's in Kyiv now. Rohit, Russia seems to be widening its attacks, doesn't it? Is there a sense where you are that these are indiscriminate, or are they hitting specific targets?
Well, Russia says they're hitting specific targets, but it's interesting to see their response to what happened at the shopping centre last night. They are saying that what we see as a shopping centre, they saw as a legitimate military target where munitions and military equipment was being stored. But that raises other questions, really, because, you know, there was no similar response after those countless attacks at residential blocks, no explanation from the Moscow Ministry of Defense, no video footage, no explanation whatsoever. You know, the Western allies are fairly clear, and they're now fairly consistent across various capitals. They say that we are now on this inevitable path because Russia has a finite number of precision weapons, because they are being frustrated on the ground. They are lashing out from the skies, and that there will be further indiscriminate attacks with civilian casualties.
Rohit Katru in Kyiv. Stay safe, won't you? Thank you.